Why did Lupin have to die? Hey, brother! Boy howdy, the Harry Potter series certainly hits us right in the stomach on the beach with a dagger when it comes to killing off beloved characters, doesn't it?
Dobby is happy to be with his friend.
Well, I bet you're glad you clicked on this video.
Oh, yes.
But I mean, we've got Dobby and Dumbledore and Snape and Colin Creevey. Don't even get me started on Fred, Hedwig, Fredwig, Lav-Lav. The list goes on. And in so many of these cases, there can often be poignant and important symbolic things left behind with each death, many of which could honestly constitute videos of their own. Hedwig, for example, really marks Harry's introduction into the wizarding world. It's his first ever real birthday gift, which he gets from Hagrid on his 11th birthday. But then the Battle of the Seven Potters is just days before his 17th birthday, and the loss of Hedwig marks his passage over the threshold of childhood and into adulthood. Colin Creevey's death marks the loss of innocence, and Fred, as George's twin, represents losing a part of ourselves to war. To which I then said to him, George, I am so sorry about this. It kind of seemed like you had already lost a part of yourself to war. To which he said, what?
That's pathetic.
Snape's death reminds us all that one bad hair day doesn't mean a lifetime of bad hair days. What I mean by that is, like, despite the fact that he did like a bunch of like bad things, it did mean he wasn't still able to do some good things in the end as well. But then there is one other death in particular that I think is the real silver bullet to the heart, and that is the loss of one Remus John Lupin. This one is strange because it happens oddly off page for what is otherwise a rather significant and important character to the saga, which begs the question, was this decision totally necessary? Was there something specific it accomplished? And as devastating as it may be, I think I actually understand. Today, I'll do my best to explain. Okay, so the death of Lupin. This one oddly has a bit of a backstory out of universe as well as significant standing in universe. The out of universe explanation actually has more to do with Arthur Weasley than it does with Remus Lupin. Allow me to explain. The wizarding world features a multitude of amazing acts of heroism by mothers. Lily's sacrifice to protect Harry, Molly Weasley's undying kindness and, when needed, protective ferocity.
Not my daughter, Hugh.
I think we all know what she was gonna say. And even Narcissa Malfoy's love for Draco in the end leads to her betrayal of Voldemort. The story does otherwise tend to be lacking in superb father figures. Snape grows up in what is clearly an abusive home under Tobias Snape. Vernon Dursley fails to parent Dudley at all and opts for blind praise, which isn't actually doing Dudley any favors. And Lucius Malfoy is a dark wizard whose allegiances place his own son in extreme danger. But in a world where Harry himself was forced to grow up with the Dursleys, you can't help but crave anyone who is simply kind and loving. And that is what both Weasleys offer in spades. And the end result is kind of a singularity that seems to exist in the form of Arthur Weasley and his knack for being a tremendous father. But of course, despite his kind and gentle nature, Arthur does still stand up for what he believes in and places his own life in danger by joining the ranks of the Order of the Phoenix. And in doing so, as we all know, his life is placed in peril when he becomes the subject of an attack by Nagini that Harry fortunately is able to catch a glimpse of and alert the rest of the Order before too much damage is done. This scene, though, according to the author, was intended to end in Arthur's death, but in too many ways, Arthur demonstrated what all the fighting was for. The Weasley's home is what we all may aspire to in our own ways. And as such, the target had to be moved from Arthur to someone else, and that someone else, of course, is Remus Lupin.
Good luck, Professor.
And those are all just facts. That is the actual explanation as to why Lupin had to die. But I actually think this ended up working out almost perfectly. The death of Lupin, though, is also the final death of the original Marauders, giving us a complete set, if you will. That feels awful to say. James is obviously attacked and killed by Voldemort during the First Wizarding War. Sirius is thrown through the veil in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, and Peter's silver hand turns on him when he offers Harry mercy. And while not officially Marauders, I think we can also fold both Lily and Snape into that equation as well, for reasons I'll explain momentarily. All of that, though, leaves Lupin really the last man standing, all but making his death a foregone conclusion. This is because thematically of what the first legion of Marauders represent for their modern day counterparts. And what I mean by that is each of the original Marauder character arcs are also depicted by a character during Harry's time at school. Harry, of course, is just the spitting image of James and features his bravery and tenacity for defeating the dark arts. They're both Quidditch stars, and Harry's Patronus mirrors James's Stag Animagus form. Ron, then, of course, is the mirror to Sirius. They are the ultimate in what it means to be a best friend. Sirius's own Animagus form as a dog is literally a play on his role as man's best friend. And similar to Ron and Harry, Sirius and James also become best friends on their very first trip aboard the Hogwarts Express. Hermione and Remus are the obvious matches for each other by being a bit less of a hothead than the other two, but whose emphasis on learning and knowledge is a great grounding force for the group. And they're also both individuals who are the target of significant prejudice for their mudblood and werewolf status, respectively. And then there is Peter, who would be best represented by Neville during the modern era. There can be no doubt that the Marauders are a clear group of four, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione clearly comprise the Golden Trio. But Neville is certainly the slightly more socially awkward member of the group who still runs in the same circles, even if he's a bit more prone to struggling with confidence maybe.
Why is it always me?
From there, it's obviously not difficult to understand how Ginny and Lily are almost carbon copies of one another. They're both fierce, powerful, strong-willed, even red-haired women who end up with Harry and James, respectively. The final one is the sometimes less obvious parallel, but trust me, it's there all the same, and that is the comparison and similarities between Luna and Snape.
Obviously.
These two are super similar in that they both round off the groups of 6 and also represent a little bit of like an outcast persona. The key difference truly lies in how each of them responds to how they're viewed by their pupils. Luna, on the one hand, has a way of simply rolling with how she's viewed and embracing her friendship.
My mum always said, things we lose have a way of coming back to us in the end.
Snape, on the other hand, hangs on to any and all slights against him forever and ever, and then some, and then he bullies Harry, and then Neville, and then Harry some more. You get the idea, but what do all of these parallels have to do with Lupin's death in particular? Well, we will keep going in just one moment, but first we need to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, BetterHelp. I cannot believe that we are already halfway through 2024 because, no joke, we still have our office Christmas tree up, and at this point I can't decide if it's better to just leave it up until it's appropriate to be up again. The point is, time is moving fast, and because of that, it can sometimes be difficult to take stock of just how awesome you actually are. Like, maybe you bought a new car, saved the day at work, helped out a friend in need, or were just nice to the folks at the checkout counter. Whatever it is important to remember to slow down and celebrate your wins. And to be 100% honest, this is something that I am working on all the time. Because what I've learned personally in therapy is that it's so much easier to focus on the negatives and the hardship than your victories along the way. But this shift in mindset can be a total game changer on your overall outlook on life. I can't recommend it enough, so if you're considering therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Take a moment. Visit betterhelp.com/super today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/super, link in the description down below. Okay, but back to today's question. What do the parallels between the original Marauders have to do with Lupin's death in particular? Well, I think it has to do so much with what ultimately drives people to sacrifice at any moment. They want to pave the way for a brighter future, if not for themselves, then for their kids, or at least the next generation. And we actually see this with every single one of these pairings. Each modern counterpart seems to have been able to overcome the challenges of their predecessors. Going back to Harry and James. James is great in so many ways, but does still stoop to bullying and arrogance. In fact, this is a line from Lily, James's future wife, during their time at school. "You think you're funny," she said coldly, "but you're just an arrogant, bullying toe rag, Potter. Leave him alone." Meanwhile, this is Harry, after everyone wanting to join the DA outlines his various accomplishments. "Look," he said, and everyone fell silent at once. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to be modest or anything, but I had a lot of help with all that stuff." "Not with the dragon, you didn't," said Michael Corner at once. "That was a seriously cool bit of flying." "Yeah, well," said Harry, feeling it would be a little churlish to disagree. "Churlish? That's a word we're all using in everyday sentences, right? The point is, Harry has every reason to feel like he stands on top of the world. He is famous, massively and vitally important to the wizarding world, continues to conquer attempts on his life by Voldemort over and over again, and through it all, maintains humility, recognizes that his wins do not come alone. Then we've got Sirius, who is brave and loyal, but also prone to hot-headedness and reckless behavior. His inability to sit one out during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries actually leads to his death. And on top of that, he seems to have like an active desire for rule breaking. I just don't want you chucked back in Azkaban, said Harry. There was a pause in which Sirius looked out of the fire at Harry, a crease between his sunken eyes. You're less like your father than I thought, he said finally, a definite coolness in his voice. The risk is what would have made it fun for James. It's almost like as much as loyalty is at the center of Sirius's actions, some personal glory still seems to be floating right next to it. But then Ron's own brashness tends to come across as a sort of thickness or lack of social understanding at times.
Do you ever stop eating?
But in the end, he does start thinking of the well-being of others before himself. Hang on a moment, said Ron sharply. We've forgotten someone. Who? Asked Hermione. The house elves. They'll all be down in the kitchen, won't they? You mean we ought to get them fighting? Asked Harry. No, said Ron seriously. I mean, we should tell them to get out. We don't want any more Dobbies, do we? We can't order them to die for us. I mean, granted, this does win him a kiss from Hermione, but still, it doesn't read like he's doing it for that particular outcome. Speaking of Hermione though, let's examine her growth compared with Lupin's. Again, it's gonna come down to how they handle and view the things that make them different from everyone else. Lupin allows his condition and how others view it to define him. He's ashamed by it, attempts to push away Tonks, who he loves, is terribly upset at the prospect of having a child, and lives in a self-enforced exile despite being a highly talented wizard. Hermione, on the other hand, is constantly brutalized by the likes of Malfoy.
You filthy little mudblood.
And while his words do hurt at first, she eventually learns to rise above it and embrace her blood status. This is her talking to Griphook. We do, said Hermione. She had sat straight up, her eyes bright. We protest, and I'm hunted quite as much as any goblin or elf, Griphook. I'm a mudblood. Don't call yourself, Ron muttered. Why shouldn't I, said Hermione, mudblood, and proud of it. Moving on to Ginny, she actually kind of has a lot less to correct for from Lily, who really doesn't have any glaring character flaws at all. All Ginny had to do was carry on the tradition of being an awesome witch. Check.
Producto!
Peter, despite being a reasonably skilled wizard, is the ultimate coward, always sidling up to whoever has the biggest stick, with no concern for betraying anyone as long as he is safe. Neville, on the other hand, despite his fear, stands up to his friends at the end of year one in the name of keeping them safe, demonstrating his budding bravery, which takes full freaking form at the end of the story when Voldemort returns from the woods with a believed to be dead Harry. In this moment, it's clear that the battle is over. Voldemort has basically won, and yet Neville does not back down.
It's not over!
I mean, to be fair, all really Neville had to do was exist, and he'd have been a massive improvement over Peter, but he takes it 10 steps further, and I dare say rises just as high as Peter sinks. Probably higher. In the end, each of the Marauders died so that the next generation could live, so they could be better than them and excel where they faltered. And of course, Lupin is the last original Marauder still standing, and as such, his death allows Harry two other big opportunities. First, he immediately reappears via the Resurrection Stone to help guide Harry towards death. And before he dies, he names Harry as the godfather of his newly born son, Teddy. And while Teddy is raised primarily by his grandmother, Andromeda Tonks, we know he spends a huge majority of his time at the Potters as well. He already seems to come for dinner about 4 times a week, said Harry. Why don't we just invite him to live with us and have done with it? And this is really significant because Harry was an orphan who was treated about as poorly as he could have been by his guardians, the Dursleys. But Lupin's death gives Harry the opportunity to correct for this as well and raise a different orphan boy with the love and care Harry should have been given in the first place. And that is why I believe Lupin needed to die. But guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you'd like to find out more about how Luna and Snape are exactly the same character, I know we didn't go deep into it in today's episode, but we have a whole video about it right over here. But otherwise, guys, until next time, bye.